Thank you for staying with us. We've started digging into our big stories. One major story today as we dilate on what the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, told us yesterday on the back of our economic situation. Like you heard him there, he was talking about some flagship programs. And he says basically the fundamentals, economically speaking, still remain strong. But how do you feel that in your pocket? Joining us for that conversation, Professor John Gachi. He is Dean with the UCC School of Business. He joins us for a conversation. We'll have others also join the fray as they share their thoughts. We have Dr. Patrick Esuming as well, economist with the University of Ghana Business School. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you, Dr. Gachi and Dr. Esuming. Professor Gachi, I beg your pardon. Professor Gachi and Dr. Esuming.
Good morning.
Right. All right, so let's start with your analysis, general overview, briefly, of what transpired yesterday in that 2-hour event where the Vice President was talking about all angles, or many angles, aspects of our economy, from the agri-sector to industry to flagship programs to banking. And he says there are 3 major things that have been a draw on our economy, citing the cleanup, the banking sector cleanup, dealing with COVID-19, among others. But from where you sit, Professor Gachi, what is your general overview of what the Vice President told us yesterday?
Thank you. Well, I think the Vice President was working within a certain context. The context is that respected international organizations such as World Bank indicated that the economy of Ghana was going down before COVID-19. Therefore, dispelling the continuous engagement with the Ghanaians that the economy is as it is today because of COVID-19. And other prominent Ghanaians, some of whom handled the affairs of this economy before, also came to buttress that point. So it's as if the government ought to correct that impression. And that was the essence in one part of the lecture yesterday, to create the impression that everything was rosy, except that COVID-19 and Russia-Ukraine crisis came to distort all. And some of the things that the Vice President indicated yesterday have been said over and over again and were rejected by many Ghanaians. Number one, I do not believe that the approach that the government took in dealing with the banking sector cleanup was the appropriate one, and that created a lot of problem for the country. If you look at the amount of money involved in the cleanup, it was estimated to be around 9 billion.
Right.
That 9 billion can resuscitate all the banks that went down. If we meant to actually resuscitate those banks. But we are being told that the amount has gone up to 21 billion.
In fact, 25
25 billion. That is actually the benefit or the outcome of a policy choice by the government. And the government should not shake that responsibility. It should not pass that responsibility to anybody. The choice that the government made resulted in that. And we do not expect the government to be crying. The government should be matching the dividend of that to the choice they have made. Also bear in mind that having done so, the government went ahead to institute what they call banking sector cleanup levy. So when you do all these things and down the lane, you are not willing to take responsibility, then I wonder what leaders are supposed to do. That is problematic, and that has been rejected over and over again. So I do not think that we will accept the fact that the debt level of the country is because there is something called banking sector cleanup. It is an exercise introduced by the government. Other options were there, they didn't explore that. So I think they should own up and then take responsibility.
Right.
And then when you come to
before you move to your next point. So when it comes to the banking sector cleanup, the 25 billion Ghana cedis that have been spent supposedly, there is talk about the fact that we're going to recuperate all of that on the back of the receiver, mopping up what must be sold so that we get those sums of money back. We also know that it's not exactly panned out the way we would have expected. Are you hopeful that we'll be able to get back the half, so 25 billion Ghana cedis that we've pumped into this endeavor? How hopeful are you that we'll be able to recoup those sums of money?
No, that would not happen. I think you heard the receiver over and over complain that even some of the assets are not there. When they value the asset, even selling the asset becomes problematic. And I believe they indicated how much they have been able to realize over time. And it is nothing to write home about. So I do not think that that will be able to raise money from the realization of those assets to the tune of 25 billion. I do not think so.
Okay. So you were going to make a point. I just wanted to sneak that in so you don't forget to talk about it.
Yeah. So when you come to COVID-19, I think we all know the simplest analysis you can do is to look at the data the government has provided to IMF. In 2020, when we were going for the 1 billion facility from the IMF. And the data is very clear that the deficit of the country in 2019 was 7.5 and not 4.7 as the government keeps telling us. The primary balance was negative 1.8 and not positive as the government wants us to believe. And what that means is that in 2018, we established or we enacted the fiscal responsibility law, which pegged deficit at 5%. So if by 2019 the deficit was 7.5, what it means is that we crashed the essence of the fiscal responsibility within 1 year of coming into force. And that spelled out how, if you want to describe the management of the finances of this country, not being prudent, or perhaps they have challenges that they have to violate the fiscal responsibility act before COVID. Of course, I am aware that there is a provision in the Fiscal Responsibility Act and also in the Public Financial Management Act to the extent that if there is a pandemic, you suspend the fiscal responsibility rules and accommodate expenditure. We understand that, but to indicate that the economy is in the situation it is today because of COVID alone, that should not be acceptable. You recall when the Vice President was speaking, he even indicated that we experienced depreciation of the currency of about 12.9% in 2019. That is equivalent to approximately about 13%. Was that COVID? Were we having COVID then? Prices of fuel was going up before Russian crisis. Of course, we need to accept the fact that these two global events actually aggravated the already precarious situation. And that is what we should be speaking to. But if a government is portraying itself to be perfect in everything and is not ready to take up responsibility for anything, that I think is very problematic. That would be my preliminary comments.
Right. Thank you for that. Let me come to Dr. Esuming now. Doc, there's also the talk about, I would like you to give your initial thoughts, but there's also the bit about the Vice President saying that we should keep faith with them, with the economic management team, and that they are going to come good when it comes to our economy. What is your general overview of the delivery yesterday by the Vice President? What are your key takeaways?
Okay, good morning, and good morning to viewers and also to Professor Yachi. So I think that in the main, the delivery just followed the scripts that we have heard before. When the finance minister speaks, and then when the president has spoken, the impression, so they say that before the COVID, the economy was doing well. And then since the COVID, the economy has been in trouble. And that, the measures that have been put in place is going to help us recover from the difficulties we are in. There are just a couple of two areas where the finance minister delivery was a little different, and that is that he presented a lot more data, including data from other places, to make his case. And then we also saw towards the end of his delivery, he spent a lot more time talking about the digitization agenda, which is something he speaks about a lot. So clearly, the finance minister, the vice president admitted that the economy is having challenges. Not just at the macro side, he took his time to explain that prices of goods and services are going up, prices of basic necessities are going up. And then, like you said, he says that, we should have faith in the measures that the government is taking. I think on the broader side, so first of all, when we spoke yesterday, I said that I wasn't expecting anything new. We are not going to hear any new major economic news or any major new intervention. And I think that's exactly how it turns out. So clearly, the government is saying the same message, that they believe in the measures that they've put in place, and that when when we follow through this, then we are going to come out of it stronger. I think broadly, I've said that the measures that we've had over the last couple of months are really short-term measures.
Right.
And mostly targeted at addressing government finances. So we've seen a lot of revenue measures and a lot of expenditure measures to try and then balance the books on the government side. The question, I don't think I've heard enough to address the real sector challenges. I think obviously the government has a lot of.
When you say the real sector challenges, what specifically are you driving at?
Well, I think the government has about 3 or so flagship programs. Right. The Planting for Food and Jobs, the One District, One Factory, and then, some other extensions, One Village, One Dam, and other things. I think those, at some point, the Vice President explained that a lot of the challenges we have is because of a fundamental structure of our economy. And that is what we need to address going forward. So when I say I haven't heard enough about what we are going to do with the real sector, that's what I mean, the productive sector. Agriculture, manufacturing, and feeding into that, changing the structure of our export versus the structure of our import. I think that is one area where I haven't heard a lot of new initiatives. Clearly, the government still believes that, its flagship programs as they stand will help us address the problems. I think we all have to admit that there has been some challenges. Because, last week, when during the SONA, when the president spoke, he made a point about the fact that we still Russia, and that is part of the problems that the Russia-Ukraine is giving us. Yesterday, the vice president also reiterated that. But then you have to question, if we have been doing planting for food and jobs for 3 years, let's give 3 years before the COVID hit, and we are still depending on grains from other places, then you have to question whether that policy has worked as well as it should have. Again, I've also said that if we knew that we are going to do planting for food and jobs for several years and we need fertilizers, and 5 years down the line, we are still dependent on fertilizers from elsewhere to the extent that when a war breaks out in a different part of the world, we are not getting fertilizers for our farmers. And I think when these problems come, and they themselves highlighted them, it has to tell us that maybe the flagship programs haven't worked as well as they should have. So we need everything. And let's not say that we cannot attribute all our problems with fertilizer to Russia, Ukraine, right? Last year, where there was no Russia-Ukraine conflict, there were problems with fertilizer supplies. So for me, I think the new measures we've had recently are really helping to address government finances. But I haven't heard enough that admits that, oh, okay, some of our flagship programs, maybe we need to retweak one or two things and do a few things differently so that those programs will work better to transform the economy. Yesterday, the Vice President did say that transforming the economy will take a little bit of time. But, we should be in a hurry. After 5 years, we shouldn't be asking for more time. We have to admit that some things have worked, some things haven't worked as well as it should, with or without COVID, and then try and address those specifics.
For you, what are some of those things, very briefly, that have simply not worked? You say some things have worked, others have not. What are some of those things that, from where you sit, have simply not worked for us?
Okay, so what has worked is that because the new oil field came on board in 2017, it helped to boost our growth. So you realize that there was a steep jump in our growth rate from 2016 to 2017-18. The biggest thing that happened in that period was that a new, bigger oil field came on stream. And when the Vice President was also talking about how our trade balance moved from a deficit of negative of $1.7 billion to a surplus, all of that, if you check the numbers carefully, you will notice that the biggest thing that happened is that our proceeds from oil export went up over about $1.5 billion or so. So that part seemed to have been working for us. But what we ourselves need to do in terms of making sure that we are diversifying our export, that part hasn't worked. Even though the economy has been growing, we have not been successful in translating that growth into ensuring that we are creating enough jobs, for instance. So yesterday, the Vice President also did mention jobs, and I think that was interesting. But you see, in an economy like this, you can't simply focus on the unemployment number and say that we are doing well on the job front because the unemployment number is lower.
Right.
Because in an economy like this, in the labor sector, the main weakness will be found in the underemployment rate and probably the labor force participation rate. So when you simply quote the unemployment number, I don't think we are doing enough justice to the weaknesses that we have in our labor markets.
Okay. Let me get to Professor Gachi. And there's also an interesting bit that comes through. Prof, it has to do with the agri sector and the industrial sector as well. According to the Vice President, these have grown twofold within the last 4 years. And that is something that, Dr. Suming also started talking about. But if we've seen this kind of growth, how has it impacted? Because like we're talking about now, agri products or things that, there's a word that just skips me, but the relevant things that are needed to ensure that farmers can do what they do, like fertilizer, has been impacted just on the back of what is happening between Russia and Ukraine. We have labor costs going up as well. So when you look at these two sectors, agric and industry, and how they have supposedly grown, has there been a fair or commensurable reflection in the fortunes of our country trickling down to ordinary people's pockets?
Thank you. I think if you look at the data presented in the 2022 budget, you will see clearly on the back of the investment in 2015-2016, the expectation of about 8 percentage point growth in the economy happened in 2017. Thereafter, you see the growth rate coming down until COVID-19 set in, where the growth rate actually is 8 or 0.9%. So it is also not true that we have been growing on average 7%. If you check the numbers, you want to even factor in the average will not be the 7% that the Vice President is talking about. Now, again, when you look at all the sectors, agri, industry, services, all of them stepped down from 2017 until COVID came in. Now, again, if you decompose industry, for example, a huge component of industry is the natural resource sector. Then the real economy outside the natural resource sector is doing nothing. And the real sector ought to be looked at critically. And that is what the government is not able to speak to. In planting for food and jobs, we have not been told how industry and agri actually coordinated to bring on board new businesses, manufacturing, processing of agricultural produce, nothing. And if you also look at, in fact, nowadays, even the Bank of Ghana has stopped publishing the details of our import, and you will see that most of the items we are importing these days are not really intermediate goods. So I believe those are the areas we should be dealing with in order to ensure that we get value for the policies we are implementing in agriculture. As it is now, there is the need for rethink about agricultural policy and how agricultural policy should speak to our industrial policy and to ensure that we impact positively in the real sector.
Let's talk about something else that is not tangential. It is actually crucial when we talk about these other sectors. It has to do with our currency and its flip-flopping on the international scale. Recently, we had the ignominious title of being the worst performing currency on the African continent. But here we are, the Vice President is talking about the fact that sometime in 2014, the Cedi depreciation hit 32.5% and declined to as much as down to 9.7% in 2016. Then he talks about the fact that in 2017, it hit 4.7%, which you have referenced already, before it rebounded to about 12.9%. Tie that into the fact that he is saying our depreciation woes are not owing to a financing problem, for which reason more borrowing is not the solution, is not needed. When it comes to our Cedi against the foreign currency conundrum, where do you see us? Do you agree with what the Vice President is saying? Figures. And do you think our approach is the right one to stabilize our currency? Prof.
Okay, thank you. I think what the Vice President has been doing when he's talking about depreciation is to pick figures without providing the basis. Now, what we should know is that generally our Cedi is a depreciating currency. But where you see significant distortion happening, then you know that something serious has happened. A serious shock has taken place, and the currency should be allowed to respond to that. So you will see erratic depreciation. He was able to explain why we are seeing erratic depreciation and basing that on the external factors relating to Ukraine and perhaps COVID-19. He was not able to explain to Ghanaians that in 2014, and again, the errors that we had, erratic depreciation, there are underlying shocks that should be explained. So the point I want to make is that when underlying shocks are pronounced, the currency will definitely respond to those underlying shocks, especially when our reserve position is not robust to tame the shock that we are experiencing. So I just want to say that those periods of erratic depreciation are responses of the currency to those shocks. And just as the Vice President is explaining Ukraine as the basis, all the years that we have those periods of erratic depreciation, we also have underlying reasons. If you take the 2015-2016 that he's talking about, you know that at a point in time, the budget announced crude oil price of around $106.3 per barrel. Within 2-3 months, it went down to $40. And then we also experienced collapse of all our major commodities, the prices of all our major commodities, to the extent that 2015, 2016, we even have to close some of the mines. That is a serious development that should impact on the currency. But if you just pick and under your regime, you are able to adduce the reason why we should consider it to be a normal development in currency management. You should be fair and do the same for the other period that do not fall under your regime. I believe that is the only problem about the vice president bit. I also was not impressed because he portrayed the picture as if so long as he was able to speak to the audience that the problem we are facing is coming from external factors. It's as if we don't have anything to do to deal with the matter. But even during the period of war, the Ukrainians are assessing how their leader is managing the war. The Russians are assessing how their leader is managing the war. We should assess how our leaders are managing the turbulent situation that we find ourselves. Just blaming external factors is not the way to go.
A quick one time. So looking at how our leadership has managed, and we heard yesterday from the head of the economic management team, has handled our own economic situation. How would you rate them? If I asked you on the back of, yes, COVID-19 and the Russo-Ukrainian war and our economic, turbulence, if I asked you to deliver a rating of the Nanado Bawumia Kenoforiata era, at least within this second term, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give them? What figure would you give them?
Well, as a lecturer, we don't just give grades like that. You need to follow masking scheme, and you need to consider a lot of factors. So I don't do those kind of rating.
So maybe you would not give a clear rating from 1 to 10, but what would your assessment be, briefly?
Yeah, the assessment is that many other important factors are not taken into consideration. Like my colleague in the studio said, the government is only looking at its finances. For example, as part of the measures to deal with depreciation, rising prices, and the rest, the policy rate was increased to accommodate the risk to the economy. That is fair. But you know that on the back of that, already the banking sector report, part of it indicated that over 89% of the lending that the government, that the financial sector has given went into government instrument. What it means is that just about 10% of the portfolio from the banking sector, financial sector, is available to the private sector. Then on the back of that, you reduce the cash reserve of the banks or the commercial banks to around 8% during COVID. Now, when you are restoring it, instead of restoring it to the 10%, you scale it up to 12%. What that means is that already the private sector that needs credit badly is not getting the level of the credit that they need to have.
Right.
All of them going to the government. Then at the same time, you have limited the ability of the commercial bank to move their deposit to loans to the private sector. That is counterproductive. So you are not incentivizing access to credit, availability of credit to the private sector to do the real sector work for you.
Right.
So those are the things I want to comment on instead of giving a rating.
Right. Dr. Esuming, what would be your quick reaction to that? I want you to feed in the bit about how the Vice President talks about the fact that between 1993 and 2000, as well as 2009 and 2016, we had our worst historical, in this Fourth Republic, exchange rate situation. Is that factual? And is it fair when you do the analysis, considering what, because then you see him citing specifically the tenure of former President Rawlings and also former President Evans Atta Mills leading into John Mahama. What are the dynamics in there that you see?
So the first thing I would like to say about that particular comparison is this. You know, those may be true, and that we may have had a 40% or 32% depreciation in a particular year. What the Vice President, as an economist, I'm sure he knows, is that if the currency is currently, if the dollar is exchanging at 3 cedis and it depreciates 40%, its impact on businesses in terms of the losses that they will incur will be much lower than if the currency is exchanging at 6 cedis and it depreciates 10%. So I think when we may be focusing on all this relative depreciation and say, oh, these people did this and these people did that, and during this person's time, this is that or that. For me, those comparisons are not helpful. If you talk to any person who runs a business, who imports cars or imports, they will tell you that if you depreciate 10% at 6 cedis, its impact on your cost is more than if you depreciate 30% at 3 cedis. But it also detracts from what we really need to be doing. And we need to start questioning whether some of the things that we import are things that we should be importing. When you think about the exchange rate, even in years that we haven't seen any strange shocks, you see that we'll be depreciating in the region of 4 to 5%. That reflects the fact that we consistently import more than we export. Now, when you look at our balance of payment accounts, the current account is heavily negative. That means on the current account side, we are bringing in fewer dollars than we are buying stuff. But if you look at the merchandise, the trade balance that the Vice President referred to, on that side, it is heavily positive. So what that tells you is that the other component of the current account, which is foreigners repatriating profits or Ghanaians importing services, like when you are importing something in Ghana, we don't have our shipping lines, we have to import services. When we go and do Eurobond, we rely on the services of foreign financial institutions. When we rely on foreigners to provide insurance service for all manner of things. And in this economy, we realize that the foreign participation has gone to a level such that foreigners are repatriating a lot of profit. Foreign participation is not of itself a bad thing, but we also need to think about the Ghanaians being active participants in the economy. You can say maybe we don't have the expertise in some services, but that is why we should not be importing things like so much rice or so much sugar or so much basic things, so much wheat or grains, when we definitely have the resources to be producing those locally. So I think whenever the city sees a sharp depreciation in a short period of time, and this has always happened, not just with this current government, even in the previous government, we do a lot of firefighting to address the short-term shocks that really move the currency very quickly. But after that is done, we revert back to our type, and we revert back to doing the same things. And trust me, this is what is happening. In 2019, in February 2019, the currency depreciated sharply. And then we did exactly what we are doing today. We will find some short-term funds, short-term dollars to balance the books, and then suddenly the city is looking fine. But what we need to do over the long term to cut our import bill and to diversify our export, we haven't done it. Every government speaks about that. Every government understands the problem. Why it is so difficult for us to take the hard decisions to address them, I don't know. Maybe because I've never served in government. So I don't know what happens when you're in government that you cannot, you know what to do, but you fail to do it.
And it's telling that you say this from the economic standpoint, because it appears the rhetoric is always different when our political parties, the major ones, are in opposition. They say all the nice things, but when they get into power, it's something different. What do you see to be the problem? Is it because I remember in this very country we had a former minister actually talk about the fact that sometimes their hands are tied, that they know what to do. And I'm sure you know whom I am referencing, that they know exactly what to do. I just don't want to mention his name. That they know exactly what they have to do, but there are different circumstances that tie their hands, leaving them fettered. And so they do not do these things. Is that what you see as well from where you sit?
Well, in terms of the import and export side, I think it's obvious that the traders and the importers are a very powerful group, and they have a very strong voice. So you've seen how the government has been dilly-dallying in terms of rolling back the benchmark. Because I think whenever Guta makes a lot of noise and then they send out a strong message, it appears that the government just, accede to their demand. So for me, I think what we can do is to say, look, those who are importing, they won't sit down for you to take them out of business because, you say you want to do import substitution. What stops us from engaging with them so that whatever they are importing, we encourage them to be part of the domestic production? I don't know if that is something that will be feasible, because if people are importing rice, and that is their living, and you can, they are not just going to give it up easily because we want to do domestic production. But perhaps, what if we made them part of the local production process themselves, so that they know that they are not going to be put out of business. They are simply going to be earning and making profit from their businesses, except that in so doing, this time they are going to be supporting the domestic economy, and they will be producing locally and be generating more jobs. So, I mean, I don't see, because people who have been there say it, that they know they have the ideas. One or two things prevent them. Maybe it's part of the type of politics that we run in this country. That might be the constraint, because there's been a lot of political scientists have been telling us that the way we are financing our parties, it might be that there are some unseen forces that finance our parties. And therefore, when they get into power, the good ideas that they may have had in opposition, maybe they feel a little bit constrained. But this is pure speculation. This is not what I study. It's not my area of expertise. But clearly, we've seen it so many times that people seem to have the idea of what we have to do. And yet when they get into power, they struggle to put it in practice.
Interesting. Let me come to Professor Gachi. We also heard from the Vice President talk about the fact that our GDP per capita has increased year on year by about 60% since 2016. He spoke about that. Put that side by side with how much we've expended on three core issues. He's talking about 50.1 billion Ghana cedis, the equivalent of about $7 billion expended on just three lines. We're talking about 25 billion Ghana cedis for the banking sector cleanup as of now, because like you know, it's moved from 9 billion to about 14 to 17 to 21, 24, and now 25. We're looking at another 17 billion for the independent power producers, the IPPs, at an extra 8.1 billion or so on COVID-19 spending. You get 50.1 billion. That is what we are being told has been spent. When you look at the two dynamics put together, are we on solid footing, spending this much on these three thematic areas? What are we not getting right?
Thank you. Well, it's just about the quality of policy choice that we have made. I talk about the banking sector cleanup cost already. It's a cost that we shouldn't incur in the first place. We should have been spending 9 billion resuscitating the banks, providing the space for effective financial intermediation. That model has been used in many countries. It has worked in the interest of the economy, but the government decided that this is the approach that they will use. So they have led to that expenditure. And it is unfortunate that is the situation. It keeps increasing. I believe by the next time that we had another lecture regarding the financial cost for the cleanup, it may go up again. So it's unfortunate that we have to dole out such amount of money for just cleaning the financial sector when other models are there we could have used in the interest of the economy. When you get to the other 17 billion or so that he talked about, again, it's all about leadership and management. Are we trying to say that if indeed we have excess power and we don't have any way around the excess power, that is poor leadership. So you don't tell Ghanaians that because you have excess, you can't do anything with the excess. That is in itself is poor leadership, is poor management of the resources that have been bequeathed you. I think that is just what it is.
Right. Let me also bring in Samson Asaki Awengobe, the Executive Secretary of the Importers and Exporters Association of Ghana. Samson, a very good morning to you. We heard from the Vice President yesterday, and among other things, he spoke about inflation, talking about the fact that the Bank of Ghana's monetary policy rate was cut by a cumulative 11% between January 2017 and January 2021. He has spoken about how there was largely disinflation before the COVID-19 scourge and now the Russo-Ukrainian crisis. Did you take any inspiration from what the Vice President said yesterday in that 2-hour delivery? Hello, Mr. Awengobe.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Did you get the question?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
I got a bit and pieces of it. I'm saying good morning to you and good morning to your cherished viewers and my very good friend, Dr. Ikachi. I'm sure we both know ourselves on faces on television, so we haven't met in person.
Right.
But I do really enjoy his intellectual assessment of the economy. I must say, just like I think Asase FM also called me yesterday morning around 11 o'clock to say that, okay, the Vice President is going to speak on the economy of the country, and they wanted to hear from me what would be my expectations.
Right.
Straight away, I told the Asase FM that I was not going to say anything. I was not expecting anything. I told him, what else? After the Finance Minister has spoken on the economic statement of the government, then after His Excellency the President himself had come to the August House to speak to Ghanaians and to tell the state of the economy. What else was Vice President was coming to tell us? All what he has said. We have heard them. This is not the first time we heard about inflation. So 11% from 2017 or 2018 till when they moved the last Bank of Ghana monetary meeting where they came out with the moving our prime rate from 14.5 to 17%, asking the commercial bank to increase to have their interest rate. Let's ask ourselves, at 11%, what was the interest rate in this country? At 14.5%, what was the interest rate in this country? Cost of borrowing, and then now your governor of Bank of Ghana is now asking commercial banks to even up the increase. On that 23% or on that 22% or whatever that they say, it's on paper. The reality on the ground is that if any ordinary Ghanaian goes to the bank today to say he was looking for an interest, a loan facility to go in, whether on businesses or on car loan or whatever, no one was paying 23%, 24% in this country. And that I can tell you. That's about how many 23 banks that we have. No bank was given at that low rate to anybody in this country. Even and now, of course, Exim Bank, what was the rate? It's 10%. But how many people got access to Exim Bank facilities in this country? And so when I heard that the Vice President was going to speak, I thought, well, as someone would say that, okay, the Vice President is now putting himself as a poster, saying that Ghanaians will have confidence in him and will vote for him to become the next flag bearer. And some say, oh, did we see him jabbing the ex-president as he used to mount a podium and then jab him because he now wants to make sure that he's now grooming himself towards to lead the new Patriotic Party. Fine, that could be. But for political gains, but in terms of business recovery, in terms of business point of view, I strongly believe that all what he has said has been said to us, through his finance minister, has been said to us through his own boss, the President of the Republic of Ghana. So it was just a waste of taxpayers' money. Because all this Ukraine...
You're saying yesterday's event, or you're speaking generally? I mean, are you saying yesterday's event was a waste of taxpayers' money.
Yesterday's event was a waste of taxpayers' money. What was he coming to tell the truth? When media people were casing me to ask of my expectation, what expectations would you think I would have looked for? I would have looked for an expectation where he said, okay, that 50% benchmark value reversal that government was reversing, that government took 20%, and we are raising issues in regards to figures and prices of goods and services at the market. He, as an economic head, is putting his foot down and saying, look, that 20% should reverse because at this point in time, Ghanaians are going through and government can't do anything to support them. And will not also take that 20% to deliberately increase prices of goods and services in this country. So hence, he's asking the finance minister to reverse it. I did not hear that. I wanted to hear him say, okay, that COVID-19 levy, that financial service levy at the port, he's asking the finance ministry to go to parliament and abolish those things, to bring down, cushion the business community and to cushion the final consumer as well, the ordinary Ghanaian. I was expecting him to have said that, prime rate moving from 14.5 to 17.5%, 17%, and asking commercial banks to increase or to update their interest rate. This is not the right time. Already, Ukraine and Russia issue is actually bothering us. It's putting us at a stretch. So, of course, the Bank of Ghana should reverse that prime rate and should not ask commercial banks to increase. Already, the Ghanaians are running away from the banks to go and borrow because of the rate at which the interest rates are. These were some of the fundamental things I was expecting to hear. And of course, I was expecting to tell us how long with that $22 billion that the Bank of Ghana will be pumping to the system, which will bring, reduce the pressure on our city. As we speak, of course, someone will tell you that since they started doing that thing, the city is now 7 point something to the dollar. But I can tell you, if you go to the black market, it's not 7 point something. And the black market that is now determine the rate, the interbank rate for us. Not only the Bank of Ghana is not determined.
So it's a pretty tricky situation and quite a number of issues that we have to get into. But hold for me, Mr. Awingobit. Let me bring back Dr. Patrick Esuming. Doc, I know you have to take leave of us momentarily. So let me just do this. The Vice President also spoke about mobile money interoperability and how the efforts at integrating the system have led to our becoming the fastest growing mobile money market in the entirety of Africa. Did it then come to you as a surprise that the former or the Vice President mentioned the E-levy only once, 129 pages of delivery, and he mentioned the E-levy only once? In fact, he's on record as having said that he wouldn't support an electronic levy. Was it any surprise for you? Doc, please, you'd have to unmute. We've not heard anything you've said so far.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. So I was alluding to the fact that yesterday one of the things I was hoping he would comment on was the E-levy. I think his silence on that matter is quite revealing in itself. I guess he probably isn't supportive of it. And when he has spoken in the past about not taxing Momo, I think he made the point that most economists have been making about the E-levy and the fact that this is really not a good tax to impose. But again, when he spoke about the digitization, I think that really explains where we need to be going in terms of raising more revenue. That is making sure that we are connecting our systems and that whatever business we are doing, we're able to find, we are captured some way, somehow. And if you are not paying your due, you'll be made to pay your due. So I think the fact that he didn't comment on the E-levy, for me, is an indication that he probably doesn't think that E-levy is the way to go, just like many other economists will say.
Any other concluding comments generally as you take leave of us?
Well, I think, we've heard all these measures to help us to get investor confidence, address government finances and all. I think ultimately, it's the Ghanaian people we should care about. And whether, if we are getting a lot of praise from international organizations and Ghanaians are suffering, it's of no use to us. So I think, as we are trying to face government finances, we should make sure that the bread and butter issues of Ghanaians are tackled. So it's not enough to say that we are growing at this pace. We want to know how many people have been lifted out of poverty, how many people are able to meet their daily needs. I think those answers are important. So going forward, I think, yes, the macro stability is important, but we have to ensure that it translates into the real living conditions of Ghanaians. And so in future, I hope that it's not just the macro numbers and the comparison of regimes, but we indicate that we are doing things that are improving the life of Ghanaians going forward.
Dr. Suming, thank you so much for joining the conversation this morning. We're very grateful for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Right. Let's take a quick stab at GUTA as well, because they have been out there talking a lot about the current economic situation and how the downturn is affecting their activity. Benjamin Yeboah is Director of Welfare with GUTA. Mr. Yeboah, a very good morning to you. Did you take any inspiration from the Vice President's delivery yesterday?
Well, good morning, Mahmoud, and thanks for having me this morning.
Right.
Well, the thing is, what I saw was the sincerity to admit that, yes, we are having some crisis sort of now, which to me was important. Because if you don't even admit we are having problems, then it will be even difficult trying to find a way to solve it. And that to me was very important. And then, well, like you just said, in terms of currency, which is actually one of the main critical issues that is affecting business. But it's not just the Cedi depreciation in terms of our businesses, but it's also even affecting the fuel in terms of it, coming down in price. And therefore, he tried to explain the reason why. I think he spoke about the late approval of the budget, which he thought was also quite damaging to them as a government. And then the low credit ratings of some financial institutions, that also affected the outlook of the economy. And then also the low investor confidence, which affected them. Now he is saying that likely the budget has been approved. They are working on a lot of things in terms of moratorium in cutting down on certain things, cutting down on expenditure, and also, more importantly, trying as much as possible to gain that investor confidence. And to him, it has started showing some signs. So yes, we can only be optimistic and hope that what he is saying will translate into reality for us to see things on the ground. Because until we see the reality in changing in terms of the city appreciating, in terms of fuel prices going down, in terms of selling indicators, well, it will be just what we've heard. So we will wait and see how what is said in terms of all the indicators will translate to something positive.
Right. And he did talk about the Cedi's depreciation, even citing past figures compared to what we've seen now. But within the last time, I mean, between listening to Finance Minister, let me just take you back a bit, listening to Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta in terms of the economic reforms, listening to the SONA delivered by Mr. President, and listening to Dr. Bawumia, what are the changes that you've seen in terms of the Cedi's, performance against the major currencies, and in terms of other dynamics, the cost basically of your members in terms of engaging in the activities they engage in? Are you seeing any improvement in your real living conditions or business conditions?
Well, putting all those three deliveries together, you realize they've come within short intervals. And therefore, it hasn't really translated into any, significant change or improvement per se. And therefore, nothing really much has changed on our business front. So that is the picture as we see now. Like I said, it's early days. He's successful. He's trying to boost that confidence in us for us to also have that confidence or that, positive mind, positive thinking. So the finance minister has said so, the president himself has said so in his own. He has come to add more flesh. And therefore, let's see if truly, it's really going to translate into those upward indicators in terms of positiveness, as they are all indicated. We as traders can only just hope that, yes, it translates to, because if it doesn't, it really affects us. The more it affects our, our capital, it brings down, businesses and all. And therefore, we are really praying and hopeful that, yes, it does translate into reality. Otherwise, that would be a real problem. But now, it's really tight.
For you, Professor Gachi, very briefly on this bit, because I want you to proffer some solutions. If you were consulted, for example, it appears we have lost Professor Gachi on that beat. I would have wanted to have him take a bite at a few issues. But let me come back to you, Samson Asaki Awengobit. So you've started by sharing your lack of enthusiasm in what the Vice President told us yesterday. But as far as the importers and exporters are concerned, what are you doing to sort of mitigate the economic situation on your membership? I mean, how are you managing within these economic constraints?
Then about the mobile money tax, the E-levy tax that the Vice President shy away from it. And not just that, the Vice President is a very smart guy. He ran away from the petroleum reduction, the 15% reduction. He was mute on it. The 15% because he knows that it was insignificant.
You felt he ran away from it? I mean, they've been talking about it. Why do you feel he ran away from it? Because he didn't mention it?
Because he knew that 15% per liter will not change the trotro fare, will not change the Okada fare. That one is running to work with traffic, heavy traffic, and want to get to office on time. You want to use Okada, the fares are still going up and up. And of course, so he ran away from the 15% because he didn't start it. Because if it was significant to the government, he would have mentioned it. And he knows that if you go and mention 15%, the ordinary person on the street, the ordinary person who go in queue and vote, will be angry with him. So he ran away from the 15% per liter reduction too. Because he didn't mention any of that sort, including the E-levy as he said. Now the other aspect you are talking of is we have asked our people to monitor on a daily basis and adjust their prices based on that. Because if you don't, and you think that dollar is 7 point something, as the government is touting, you finish selling, then the dollar is 9 cedis. And the dollar, it's $1 to the cedi will be 9 cedis, or will be 8 cedis. And you wouldn't know. Because you can't, as they said, 2 days, 3 days time, then the thing went move back to 8 cedis. Just yesterday, I think it was back to 7. So it's ups and downs. So if you don't monitor the market and adjust your price accordingly, you will finish selling your stock, your ware, then you cannot even go back to bring another cargo. And that will be a cost to you. So currently, as the interest rate it is, and the government policies have been adjusted, everybody is now running away from the bank because of the high interest. Because although the prime rate was 40.5, and people were complaining about bank interest, now you move prime rate to 15%, and ask the commercial bank to move up their interest rate to which one? To 27%, to 28%, or to 30%. Already, Ghanaians were borrowing between 25, 26, 27, and maybe you get it. So we are skeptical. We are monitoring the dynamics, the ups and downs of the market, and based on that, then they have to adjust themselves. So we continue to monitor and advise them accordingly. And that is why your wife, my wife, your sister, my sister, your son, myself, will go to market today to buy a commodity. Tomorrow you go back, and that same commodity price has changed.
The Vice President asked that we keep faith with the economic management team, with how they are, the measures they've introduced to ensure that our economy remains on a steady footing. And to quote him here, he says, we may not achieve everything we set out to achieve, but that must not stop us from trying. We must celebrate our achievements, big or small, and not seek to tarnish or belittle them for the sake of politics. I look forward to all of you playing a role in making our nation great and strong.
I have a question.
Right. What is your question?
I have a question for the Vice President. Why is it that he led the team that gave the benchmark values to the business community? At the time the finance minister was banned in taking reverse the benchmark values and were called on him. Why was he mute? Why he was the same person who led in this economic management issues? He says E-levy, he don't think more money should be taxed. When we were calling him, why was he mute? Why did he wait till the things damage finished before he comes to do damage control? That's why he did yesterday was a damage control. Because you have been speaking on certain things vehemently. And when your own government is bringing them back, and today I call on the vice president, why was he mute? Why did he wait till this has to come, and we are not saying we should praise you? We cannot praise him. We cannot praise him when the Ghanaian ordinary person is going to the market and the price of goods keep on changing. How would they praise you? That is why we are sacrificing, of course. We were already sacrificing. It's not just yesterday's speech that will make Ghanaian sacrifice to say that we are in a challenging time. All of us have identified that we are in challenging time. But you see, they should not be quick to push it to only the Ukraine issue. That's why someone is asking that why Ukraine and Russia invasion, our neighboring countries' currency are still stabilized, and our currency is running down. It's because of mismanagement. It's because of they have not put down their foot in the right direction.
Right.
And so he should be blamed. And if he's been blamed, they will sit up to do the right thing. His finance minister talks about no duty, no exit at MPS. We have raised issue. Remember yesterday he made mention of it. But we have raised issue that why should we keep dangerous cargo in the port? If we go to the MPS themselves, they will not like to keep dangerous cargo in the port. Because they should keep the dangerous cargo, because someone hasn't come to pay duty yet, then there will be explosions, then our port will burn, our port will be destroyed. No. We have said that those who force people, frozen food people, is being scanned at MPS, debtors are there, it's been transferred to depreciation and other terminals. Why do you say we should keep them there and pay duty there? No one will pay duty at MPS and allow his cargo to go to depreciation river terminal or Golden Jubilee or any terminal outside the port.
Right.
If I pay duty, I'll take my cargo straight to my warehouse, straight to my cold store.
Right.
So they have to revisit again. So if he was speaking on issues, policies that the finance minister has announced, and then we from trading point of view have raised issues, he would have come to say, look, no. Already the interest rate is starting to drive him about. So asking Commercial Bank to increase to up their interest rate is rather going to put Ghana at the risk level, because people will be shying away from the bank.
Mr. Awingobid, as we wrap the conversation, I'd like to hear from you. The Vice President says we must celebrate our gains, our achievements, big or small. Okay. You've spoken about all the negatives. You've spoken about all the sticking points. Was there any positive that you derived from his delivery yesterday? Is there any bright light as far as how it reflects on you, the importers and exporters? Was there any bright light from yesterday's delivery?
He only come to give us hope that we should bear with the government, and government will definitely come out from this struggle, so we'll come out together. I think that assurance coming from him, that I may take it. But I can tell you, if you go to the street and ask the ordinary person that at the end of the day, what the vice president have said, what they deduce from, they will tell you that they are still looking at their pocket. There is no any reflection on their pocket. And so while the ordinary person will say there's no any reflection on their pocket, and I'm speaking for a business community profits are running down. As we speak, there's another policy at the GRA, which is the flat rate amendment act. That is also an issue the business community are looking into. And so while the business community are complaining, I will complain. If the business community say business doing, I will come to say, I don't fabricate issues. But all in all, what he came to do was to also let the people know that, okay, when others were calling that, well, he has run away, he is in Ghana here, he hasn't gone anywhere. And this is his position. But I can tell you, the ordinary people, as you are showing on your screen now, if you go and ask the lady smoking the fish and selling at the market, will tell you that the price, the one who's going to buy from that woman, will tell you that when they come and I put my price, they shy away, they run away. That is what we are talking about. We want him to put the economic perspective, Ghana's economic very lucrative in the eyes of even our neighboring countries. Our neighboring countries will not be enjoying more than we.
Okay.
As you said, Ghana is the gateway to West Africa. And you come to Ghana and our Cedi, depreciation is not the best drive home about. I strongly believe that he has to do something more.
Asaki Awingobid Samson, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Do we still have Mr. Yabua, if Benjamin Yabua is still with us? Okay. Joining the conversation, those who joined us, Benjamin Yabua, Director of Welfare with GUTA. We had Professor Gachi, who is in charge, Dean of the University of Cape Coast School of Business, Dr. Patrick Esuming as well, economist with the University of Ghana Business School. And of course, we had also joining the conversation, Samson Asaki Awengobit of the Importers and Exporters Association. We're done with this hurdle, but coming up next, we're going to be telling you about a book which will soon be launched. What should you know about it? Details right after the break.